All right. Hello, guys. My name is Glenn Sæstad. I'm here to present my master thesis from spring of last year called CBDC for SDG, a bit cryptic. Before I sort of jump into this, I just want to give you an impression of what I actually do now, because I have started and one of the partners of Lokalt Byrå. It's me and Nikolai. It's a bit outdated because it's not we. I guess it's just me here now, and it's not just me and him. It's also Tobias now, so we have to take new photos. But what we do is that we use design to sort of help communities, create more sustainable and joyful everyday lives together. And we really use like a place-based and everyday sort of setting as an anchor for our design work. And the reason why it's so difficult to get new photos is that we're a decentralized design studio. So our head office is in Storfjord. And then I run our district office at Youngstorget in Oslo. And then I also have this gutteroms kontor at Sola, where I'm from. And then a cabin office in Egersund. So some of what we do, I mean, we really like working outside the cities. Like here in Gamvik, which is the northernmost community on mainland Europe. We're working with this local store, sort of exploring how this can be more of like a community hub, workshop, culture house, where we do this by prototyping, testing out with citizens who live there, sort of see what it works. And then we use all of that sort of action to sort of build a whole service model around it. We're also involved with this, which is a pilot project for Experience and Knowledge Center against marine littering in the Oslo Fjord. It's a place where school children and students, businesses, and politicians can come and learn about like what are the causes of marine littering in the Oslo Fjord and what are the solutions. Where we also use a sort of try to teach everyone a bit of like systemic thinking, because it's a complex issue that no one can solve this alone, but everyone can still do something to sort of push the system in a better direction, even if you're a first grader or a high schooler or student, business leader or politicians. So that's the advertising. So in this master thesis, I explored how this central bank digital currency, was often shortened to CBDC, could enable new policies for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, so SDGs. And very few have heard about central bank digital currencies before. It's very new. And to explain it sort of simply, we could think of it as a sort of digital alternative to the cash that the central bank produces today, or as a public alternative to the electronic money that we have normally in banks today, with Visa cards and banks, sort of electronic money, but as a public alternative in the central bank instead of Sparebank and DNB, or as a sort of national digital currency with more crypto-inspired functionality. It doesn't have to be crypto-based, but sort of inspired. And if it's still a bit unclear to you what exactly this is, that's totally fine, because 90% of the world's central banks are trying to figure this out for themselves right now. Including our own central bank in Norway, Norges Bank. And the issue here, sort of as I saw, is when they look into this technology and use case and all of that, is that they're mainly looking at what can this mean for their own mandate today, which is focused on financial stability and financial efficiency. So more of the same, faster, so to say. And then at the same time, we have the UN and the IPCC calling for cross-sectoral action with all available tools to go as low as possible above the 1.5 degree target. So sort of my way into this was saying, okay, now we're in the early exploration phase of this new technology. We should at least just ask a question if there's anything to do with this, with this new technology, instead of just, making finance faster. And I don't know if there's any economists here, but normally when I say this, economists get a bit, queasy, because it's the last 50 years, this central bank independence has been a very important principle for all Western central banks. And so it means that the central banks, they should not be influenced by or involve itself in other political areas. We all the time we see these news articles about people saying, all politicians need to change the interest rate or whatnot. But then no, leave it to the central bank. And so sustainability concerns is something that traditionally has fallen outside of the central bank's mandate because of this principle of central bank independence. So this, the saying is that, since the central bank is not under direct control by elected politicians, if they were going to, decide some sort of policy that was going to change the world, for instance, sustainable transition, then that would be undemocratic because it would just be a bunch of bureaucrats deciding this. But it seems like we're sort of in front of a paradigm shift, as I see it, with sort of central banks and sustainability, because we see more and more of these connections between the effect of climate change on the global economy and then financial stability here in Norway. It's not possible to have a stable financial system if global trade is collapsing because of hurricanes and whatnot. So this is just, to me, it was just another argument to sort of zoom out from this today's understanding of what the central bank and their mandate is when we look into future use cases for these central bank digital currencies, sort of asking, what if or just in case. And then we have also these other high-level policy documents, the government white papers on innovation in public sector and the sustainable development goals. And they also say as, public sector innovation, which this sort of is, I guess, is one of the government's main strategies for solving society's challenges in the coming years. And so both of these papers, which in theory should apply to the central bank also, if I'm not mistaken, they both state like the importance of thinking outside today's mandates and roles. And then at the same time I did this thesis, there was, this incredible gold rush with cryptocurrency. And that sort of collapsed last fall, and we haven't heard much since. Everyone is focused on inflation now. And I'm pretty skeptic towards crypto, Web3, metaverse, and all of that. Since there's like a growing amount of both academic research and practical examples showing, why this space probably will not contribute much to like the betterment of society. And this space, it's characterized by an incredible optimism towards technology, skepticism towards the idea of a state and society, and a sort of tendency to like reduce a lot of, social interaction, social relations down to sort of economic transactional thinking. But the technology coming out of this movement is sort of interesting, that you can program money to execute behavior through data and code automatically, what we call smart digital money. So what happens if we use part of this, but with more aligned to like this Nordic model of government, characterized by an active state that democratically shapes society? So could sort of this inspire us to think a bit new about, central bank digital currencies and what they could do? As far as I saw, there wasn't a lot of research into this. And so this sort of led me into this framing, like how might central bank digital currencies become a new platform for public sector innovation and sustainable development? And here I have to go into a tangent on sort of what does a platform mean? Everyone likes talking about platforms, but what do they mean? When I mean it, it's not just sort of something, digital, but as a project or an activity acting as a springboard, the springbrett, for many other projects and activities. Like when you have this, it's easy to do other stuff. Very banal example is children's sports, which is a fantastic platform for doing integration, socioeconomic smoothing, equality, and public health. And when you sort of put these perspectives in, you get all the sort of activities out on the other end. in stark contrast to just thinking this as something that has to do with competition. So thinking about central bank digital currencies as a platform is then like about exploring what other concerns that we can add to this core mandate, and then see what comes out on the other end. And to do this, I worked in dialogue with a working group at the central bank and a network of 24 experts in economics, sustainability, fintech, and policymaking. And so I'm neither an economist or expert in monetary politics, but sort of what I bring into this group as a designer is, try to use, creative thinking and methods, visualization, prototyping, sort of connect all of these different perspectives into new ideas. Like, oh, what if we did this? What if we did that? And so that's what I did. I made a lot of sketches about future use cases, trying to look into different sort of applications. So sort of the goal was to sort of help expand, these strategic discussions among these regulators and policymakers, because exactly when we're researching this new, potentially radical technology that we haven't seen before, we can't just discuss the numbers and laws. I don't know if you noticed, but in the working group at Norges Bank, I'm shaming them a bit now, but it's just economists and lawyers. It's people who can, do the numbers and say if something is legal. It's a bit interesting that those are the people who say, what can we do? Like, what's the totally new stuff that we can do with this? Yeah, so we have to actually, design with the new possibilities, design with the technology to understand, what can it practically mean? What are the consequences? What are the applications? And so I delivered 4 design examples, and they are sort of, I call them thought provokers around these technological possibilities, but also concerning politics and what a sustainable economy actually means. And they're not meant to be, perfect solutions. I'm not suggesting them, we should do this, but it's sort of to invite policymakers, politicians, and regular citizens to come in and discuss this. So let's see how many we have time to go through. Here you see a set of fictional news articles from a possible future scenario. This is sort of the first example. And it's to sort of explain the background of my first example. And that were, today we try to reduce emissions through carbon pricing and selling carbon quotas. And the resulting issue then is that the world's 10% richest, who are responsible for over half of the world's total emissions, they have enough money to sort of consume us before. While it's the poorest who are hit hardest by flight fees, higher gas prices, and other carbon taxes, right? So what if we tried another ethical framework, for instance, inspired by the philosopher Kant, where a sort of just or fair emission policy is that no one is able to emit more than what any other person could. So through a parallel currency system called carbon rations, all citizens get an equal share of carbon rations attached to their person. And then they use this to pay alongside normal money according to price and emissions. And so you're still able to spend as many krones as you have and want to in your account, as long as you buy goods and services with low enough total carbon emissions. And so it makes it so that the poorest with low consumption levels, they notice little to these restrictions, while it's the richest with the highest emissions are the ones that have to make big changes to their consumption habits, but also creating a huge demand for low or zero emission luxury goods. The second example looks into sort of what structures might be needed to stimulate more of a long-term and resource-efficient thinking in the economy. So the construction industry, it's often called the 40% industry because it globally contributes to 40% of the world's energy use, material use, and climate gas emissions. And in this scenario, the Ministry of Commerce, Næringsdepartementet, they want to pilot a new transaction platform for more sustainable business models. And this new platform, it connects the producer's profit motive closer to the performance of their projects by paying out the sales amount or the funding gradually throughout the product's life cycle. And what could that look like? So in this example, a county sets up a long-term contract with the suppliers involved in constructing a new high school. And this contract entails that the project's funds, they're paid out gradually throughout the building's lifetime of 60 years, as long as the building is still useful. And the terms of the contract is programmed into a smart contract, meaning that all of the funds are transferred from the county at start, but locked until set milestones during the 60 years. And so this way, all of the parties can then trust a payment plan spanning across half a century. And if the buildings, if it falls in quality or its usefulness faster than the planned life cycle, then the suppliers, they lose the right to receive the rest of the locked funds. And so the suppliers now have an incredibly strong incentive to ensure that the building is designed and built to be as user-friendly, flexible, and easy to maintain as possible throughout the building's life cycle. Something that didn't really affect the people who are involved in the design and construction phase today. And so this new model for procurements, it leads to a large restructuring of the construction industry. For instance, how these suppliers are, they collaborate and work together on designing and building, and how they're financed. So now have to do a much better job than to ensure that there's a real need for this building. And then there's also these new financial products that come along using these future payments from these contracts as security. The third example, it examines how a national infrastructure for this type of digital money could enable and scale the potential of local currencies. So in this scenario, focus on local value creation and money circulation has made rural municipalities and regions request pilots for local currencies, inspired by other examples today in Europe and Great Britain. And through dialogue with sort of these examples, they uncover that a shared challenge between all these local currencies has been that it's very expensive to have, you know, your own digital infrastructure and maintain that for your own city or neighborhood even. And so then they request that the central bank sort of develops this platform for central bank digital currencies further to support kroner with geographical limitation. So here we see a possible example from Egersund, where the municipality and the business association launches Okkapeng, local currency, supporting local businesses, circulating more money locally, and strengthening city development. So the way that it works is that 1 Okkapeng is worth 1 krone when shopping. But when people in Egersund exchange regular money into Okkapeng, they receive a 5% exchange bonus. But exchanging back into regular kroner, it requires a 10% fee. So once the money is in the system, it's beneficial to keep them there as long as possible. So using Okkapeng is a good deal if people in Egersund are going to shop locally. And the local businesses get a good deal when spending the Okkapeng that they receive on other local suppliers. And then in the end, it's possible to pay taxes to the municipality in the Okkapeng, which then releases the normal sort of kroner that's stored in as security in the system because it's still backed by kroner. And Okkapeng makes the citizens of Egersund, who are already, you know, very proud of their own city and culture, more aware of how circulating money locally leads to a more unique and resilient business community and more local opportunities. The local currency system then facilitates for more local production and trade, supporting the sustainable development goal. I don't remember the number, but the one about sustainable, responsible production and consumption, which is the sustainable development goal that Norway is, you know, struggling the most with. The fourth and last example, it sort of supports this, you know, current undertaking towards more public volunteer collaboration to deliver better and more economically sustainable welfare services, trying to go from expensive treatment to more cheaper prevention. For instance, having not to send a lot of people to psychiatrists. But this example tries to take that a bit further into more of a strategy towards more sustainable well-being economy. So in this example, organized volunteers, they receive this volunteer kroner as a reward from the municipality, as a way to highlight the social value of them coming together to, play badminton, fix engines, singing in choirs, in plays, and so on. And the citizens, they can use this sort of separate parallel currency system to pay for goods and services back from the municipality, like trips to the swimming hall, public transport, or public cantinas. So it's sort of, universal basic income, if someone is familiar with that. But maybe more interesting is that you could use that to do citizen budgeting, which is where citizens suggest and then vote using their volunteer kroner on what projects the municipality should fund in their local area. Because if you have a lot of volunteer kroner, it means that you actually spend a lot of time doing organized activities in your area, so you're very connected to what's happening there. So it's sort of interesting to connect that to some sort of democratic power. And the idea is that this volunteer kroner lets people work a bit less and care more for others and experience just as much or more well-being. So less income for consumption, but more meaningful every days. And that was 4 design examples, but so what? Okay, it's interesting, but what does this mean for the central bank? So sort of to round off my design work, and come into some strategic policy recommendations, I use these 4 examples to sort of reflect, what needs to change in the current way that we work with this technology, or the central bank works with this technology, to support, these sort of more expanded set of use cases. And so, first of all, it's central bank digital currencies need to be framed more as a platform for public sector innovation, where financial efficiency could be a sub goal, but not limited to. And this also aligns, with what we have to do further, because we have to solve a lot of complex social issues, but we have less and less money to do it with, as we will sort of phase out of the oil sector. And so we have to think about how one thing can do a lot of different stuff. And the second point is then about building this flexibility into the technological solution, where you can support, but more interesting maybe start piloting very easily local sort of new ideas, and then scale them out and integrate them into think about how can we have different sort of currencies in VIPs. And then the third point, sort of calling back to this issue of central bank independence. Yeah, it might not be politically neutral for the central bank to launch carbon rations or volunteer kroner. Something it needs to be decided by maybe the Kulturdepartementet. Something requires a lot more political backing, but it doesn't have to be the central bank who decides what it's actually used for. They can still maintain it, build it, develop it, and then other parts of government, do their stuff on top. Like with the Digitaliseringsdirektoratet, who runs Altinn today, but it's the politicians who decide, how the welfare services that runs through Altinn actually works. And then the last point is that central bank digital currency, as a sort of undertaking or new project, is just as much about society, that we get to make some decisions now about how we want money to work, and not just about, what are the new technological features that this sort of could introduce. So with this digital money, we have a lot more possibilities to design more specialized monetary systems for different sort of political goals. And what those monetary systems are is just as much about politics as technology. And so the examples that I've shown, they stretch from the everyday to the sort of radical, and sometimes people get a bit angry. But the effect of this is that it invites regular people in to discuss this technology. because it's easier to imagine what effect it might have on their own lives compared to, looking at the reports from the central bank, which is all, these graph models or talking about credit risk or, words that normal people don't use. So I presented this project alongside the central bank last fall at Coconomics here in Stavanger. And people, they told me afterwards that they hadn't really understood what this technology was or what it could mean until they had seen some, concrete designed examples through some user interfaces. And, there was some, angry opinion pieces in Stavanger Aftenblad and Dagens Næringsliv saying, that this will lead us all to a surveillance state. But that's also okay, because how society uses these digital central bank currencies, it can't be decided by the central bank alone. It's a public decision. And to do that, we need to have a sort of inclusive and informed public debate. And that's what I hope this thesis has been an interesting sort of contribution for. Thank you.